Hello, family members. I hope you're having a nice day today. I want to talk to you today about Mars, and specifically Elon Musk's view of Mars as a potential place for human habitation, because it's kind of wild and we need to get into it. Before we start, though, I do want to kind of give you a little background on my understanding of, anything related to space travel. So, my grandfather actually worked at Kennedy Space Center. My mom actually worked there too, but she worked in the cafeteria. That was like her first job out of high school. I think that's hilarious. Her brother, though, was an engineer there. So our lives, their lives, were a lot about the Cape, and my mom grew up with a lot of her friends, had dads that worked out there too, very familiar, very pro space, like childhood. And so when I was a kid, we grew up in West Virginia, but my parents would bring us down here every couple, like a couple of times at least every year. And so, I'd get to see launches from the pool in my granddaddy's backyard, or, easily go down to the beach and see like a dawn launch or something. I did that on the day that we had my grandma's funeral, actually, and it was like an ethereal experience because she lived right there. So we went out to the beach, and I mean, we were on Cape Canaveral Beach watching this. So it was, kind of it's kind of my life is knowing a lot about what goes on at the Space Center compared to a lot of other people. My education is biology. So, I know a little bit about science more than the average person, but it's not, astrophysics or anything. Astrophysics for me is something that I learn about because I love it. I find it fascinating, having been to the Space Center and seen some of the spacecraft and watched launches and everything. I mean, I can still see launches from my backyard. I watch launches from my backyard all the time. Like, it's, unless it's cloudy, I can see them. um, so yeah, I am an amateur, but I do know more than your average person about space travel and have taken an active interest in astrobiology and, the physics and the realities of space flight. So, um, take what I say with a grain of salt. I'm going to give you lots of references in the description. But let's go ahead and talk about going to Mars. So, going to Mars is not an easy task. I mean, we have sent several different satellites and rovers and landers and different things there. But it is a difficult task, even to send those unmanned missions. And there's been, actual failures along the way, which, when it's $1 billion spacecraft, is a pretty bad deal. But you definitely don't want to have human astronauts on the $1 billion spacecraft when there's a problem. Anyway, getting to Mars, from what I could see, is about 9 months, the actual time in spaceflight. Now, the longest that any humans have ever been in space has been about 14 months. And that's pretty exceptional. Most of the longest residencies in space are measured in, like, less than 9 months. But there are some that have been, a little over a year, a little under a year. So we do know that humans can survive for 9 months in space. However, extended time in the low gravity of space, because people like to say it's 0G. It's not 0G, it's just low gravity. In the low gravity of space, basically what'll happen is your body just goes haywire. It can cause problems with your circulatory system, all your veins and arteries. It can cause you to have arrhythmias of your heart. It can cause you to have muscle weakening, especially in the postural muscles of your spine, giving you permanent back pain. Being in space for even like a few months is enough to decrease your bone density like to 6 to 9%. Basically gives you osteoporosis. That's sort of what you're getting. And, your general muscles can just be weak, it is, and it affects your immune system too. It causes you to be weaker and have a damaged immune system. So you've got people who have spent 9 months in low gravity that are already dealing with a lot of these effects. Then they land on Mars and they've got to build themselves a habitat. Building a habitat on Mars is going to be a challenge. Everything that you have to take there is going to make it so much harder to actually go, because you have to have enough fuel to get that bulk into space out of the Earth's atmosphere. That's not easy. That takes a lot of energy. And so you want to minimize the weight of whatever you have to send, but you have to send everything: food, water, air, shelter, clothing, everything that you could possibly need. Because the best case scenario, if you have a problem, is that it would take someone about 9 months to get to you. And that's assuming that Mars is at its closest. Whereas if you have an emergency, what are the odds? So there's no way that a colony could get, regular food and all of the things that it needed to exist just sent to it from Earth. That would not work. But if you're talking about a small research outpost, you could probably bring enough supplies. And there's been a lot of work that's been done on Earth to try to come up with ways to make habitats on Mars that don't require you to have to bring heavy materials all the way to Mars. One of them I think is fascinating, and I've heard about this for a while. This isn't a new idea, is using fungus, because fungus has a body that is up below the ground. When we see fungus, we generally are seeing like the mushrooms. That's the fruiting body. That's like the apple. The actual tree is the mycelium. And so you can basically get it set up so that there's sort of a small mycelium network, and then you can allow it to gain bulk once it's there, and essentially make sort of like building material out of that mycelium. But this is something that, is still very experimental. We are not ready to do this yet. I don't know that it would be ready for 2030. It might take longer than that. And if you don't have a plan to make a shelter, it's going to be hard to make a long-term outpost. The best that we could probably hope for in those early expeditions are people who go and stay in their own ship and then leave, and within a relatively short period of time. By relatively short period of time, it would probably be, I believe, like maybe a year and a half is the sort of target time. That's not very long, And then, of course, they got to get back on the spaceship. that Mars's gravity is lower than Earth's, but it does have some higher gravity than you would experience in space. So we don't obviously know how much that would counteract the low gravity damage on the astronauts' bodies if in that year and a half that they're there on Mars, they're able to get a little bit better, or if they will continue to deteriorate. And then they got to get back in and go all the way back to Earth. I mean, conservatively, people say it would be 3 years. 3 years in the extreme low gravity of space and the reduced gravity of Mars. And the longest we've ever had a human actually endure conditions that are kind of like that is 14 months. So we're already in problem zone right here. We're not anywhere near ready for, I don't know. I think NASA's maybe being a little optimistic there when they say 2030s, but whatever. So we get there, maybe, 10 years from now, we have the mycelium technology. We can start building a base. But then you need oxygen. And, there's plans to use cyanobacteria to do that. But again, the technology has to be developed. And then you need to get food. And when it comes to generating food on Mars, probably the things that would be most likely to grow are what we would call fruits and vegetables. Things like, tomatoes, beans, potatoes, like in The Martian, maybe, things like that. Grains are going to be difficult. Grains take up a lot of space. We don't have a lot of space, at least not at first, that we could do agriculture on Mars. So grains are kind of out. So we're going to be living on primarily vegetables and fruits because we're not going to have meat unless we bring it with us. The idea that we would have enough excess food to try to raise animals, even chickens or mice or whatever, small animals, to the point where it could be industrialized and made into food for a colony, is just, that's not going to happen. So they get to Mars, they do an outpost or whatever, and that's their life, is they're living in this mushroom brick, enclosure, having to, be very careful about anytime you go outside, the radiation is very dangerous. I mean, that's really the main reason why spaceflight causes all those health issues, And so it's the low gravity and the radiation. It's both of those things that kind of work together. And so there's nothing on Mars protecting you from radiation. The reason that Earth is inhabitable is because we have an atmosphere and we have a magnetosphere. That magnetosphere, coming from the Earth's molten core, is what keeps some of the sun's radiation from actually getting to us. That's what you're seeing when you see the northern lights or the southern lights, is you're seeing particles from the sun actually hit the magnetosphere and create that like beautiful ethereal glow, right? And Mars does not have that. So all of our radiation shielding is going to have to be in our habitat and whatever, sort of space suits or space vehicles that we come up with. And radiation shielding is not easy, and it can be quite heavy and quite cumbersome. So even the early colonists on Mars, after they do those first expeditions, within a few decades, they finally get those first colonies established. that is going to be a tough life. That is not going to be something that an Elon Musk is wanting to endure. It's going to mean a lot of work. It's going to mean not being able to eat what you want when you want. You're going to have to eat what there is when you're able to. You're not going to have, you know, drugs and parties and, I mean, I guess you would have video games. That's probably, but you're probably not going to have much time for them. Like, I've watched things about people who go to McMurdo Station or of the other Antarctic bases, and life is not a comfortable life in any way. And you have to be okay with the fact that if there's an emergency and the resources that are available in your immediate vicinity aren't good enough, there's not a plan B. I mean, when like somebody has a serious medical issue at the Antarctic stations during the winter months when we can't get there, it is catastrophic because I believe there was a time when it was even the doctor who was there to take care of the station got sick. And so they didn't have anyone because they were the one. And they had to have they do like remote help. But the thing that you have to remember about being on Mars is there's no real-time communication. It's going to take minutes for any communication to get from you to Mars and then get a response back. So you wouldn't be able to get real-time help. And that's kind of hard in a medical issue, So it's not going to be a fun life for those colonists. They're going to have to be brave people that are going to be willing to sacrifice an awful lot to get a little bit of a toehold there. And then the idea of having a viable human population on Mars that could survive without Earth is laughable. I mean, it's not in any way a perfect analog, but think about how long it was between the time that Europeans first started exploring North America and when they got permanent colonies started. It was like 100 years, maybe hundreds of years really, to get a really firmly established, viable colony that could self-replicate. And that was going into land that already had humans in it that helped some of the early settlers or, had come up with different strategies the settlers could adapt to survive in this new environment. And they weren't dealing with radiation issues, and they weren't dealing with gravity issues, and they weren't dealing with the fact that they were on a whole nother planet where there's no resources really other than regolith. You got rock, and you've got some frozen water, and that's what you got to work with. It's not a lot, And so I'm not saying that humans can't do it, but I'm saying that it's going to take a long dang time. I don't imagine that humans would be permanently residing on Mars until maybe 2200, the year 2200. That's probably possible. But again, we have to want to do it. It's expensive, and I don't know. I mean, that means that we'd have to have enough political stability for missions to keep running in a timely manner to even hit some of those conservative targets. So when Elon Musk, just like brazenly goes, oh, Carl Sagan was wrong. We have Mars as a escape hatch or escape plan. It's just so delusional. It's just so fact-free. It's just so obvious that he doesn't understand and doesn't care to understand. Because there's no way that there aren't people who would be willing to tell him all the things that I just said. But he would have to be willing to hear it. And that is something I don't think is going to happen. Now, anyone who could tell Elon Musk that he's wrong or that he's missing nuances has been summarily removed from his life. He doesn't need them. There's always someone else that can step up and take up whatever role a person has in his life. Whether it's wife or girlfriend, whether it's child, son, basically. I mean, we're talking about a man who, it has been alleged by his daughter, Vivian Wilson, that he used selective IVF to ensure that he only had sons. He's not somebody who has a very good grip on reality. I'm just saying, like, he thinks that he needs to populate the world, but like, who has the babies, Elon? You know, daughters can have children too. Oh my gosh, he's very, very certain he understands things that he doesn't understand. You know what I mean? And it's a little bit frustrating because he'll confidently say things like, we don't have to treat the earth with the utmost respect because there's other places we can go. But he's wrong. I mean, he's just wrong. You know, his children's children probably wouldn't be able to live comfortably on Mars. You know? The idea that we could just abuse the earth, be able to make it last. I mean, he doesn't, I don't think that Elon Musk believes that the entire human race is going to survive whatever happens next. I think that he believes that a certain amount of the population will be able to move off planet, and then whatever happens on the planet happens on the planet. And that's just morally disgusting, honestly. If something were to happen to the Earth and we had an established colony on Mars and it was big enough that we could reproduce without becoming inbred, so a viable population, that would be a tragedy. That would be a horrible disaster. If the Earth was permanently destroyed, even if the human race continued to exist, that's horrible. And I feel like he has in his head that that's inevitable. And so in his mind, what he's doing is preparing for that. And he's not. He's just not, you know. The thing about SpaceX is that it does not operate the way that NASA operates. NASA, being a government entity and money coming from taxpayers, they have to fight for every dollar that they get. They can't just throw whatever into NASA. And anytime there's a failure, that is a loss of resources and money. And it's going to make it that much harder to get your funding for the next project. And so they are so careful. Most of the time they spend, you know, maybe even decades going through and making sure that every little thing is okay and ready. I mean, we're talking about years of development, testing. You know, every single rover that we have has an exact duplicate on Earth so that we can still continue to test it. Uh, it's not something that they do lightly. They don't do launches unless they're almost entirely positive that whatever launch is going to be a success. And SpaceX does not run like that. SpaceX runs like a tech company. And that's why we keep having these rockets blow up and cause problems. And for a private company that can get resources from other ways than just taxpayers, yeah, you can do that. But I don't know. I don't think it's better. It's just wasting resources. Like, he wants to move fast and break things. That's the tech bro Silicon Valley idea, right? And when you're talking about space travel, human space travel, we don't want that to happen. It's not just expensive, but it's morally bad. And so here we are in a situation where we have a man who just is so disconnected from the realities of his goals, of what he's working towards, that any efforts he makes are going to be so misguided as to, I don't know, are they even going to be helpful towards his ultimate goal? I had heard that he was opposed to funding going to the moon with NASA. I'm not sure. I don't have a reference for that one, so don't quote me on it. I can't say for certain. But what I can say for certain is that, oh my gosh, I completely lost my train of thought. It's one of those days, isn't it? Hey, Loki. I don't remember what I was talking about. It's okay. It happens. So anyway, you have somebody who is potentially going to end up working against his own self-interest because he is so divorced from the realities of what it is that he wants to achieve. And it's frustrating. It's just frustrating because he has so much power and so much influence and so many resources at his disposal. And he's using them in a way that is probably not going to even do what he wants to do. It's completely ineffective. And I think it would be a lot more beneficial to the world, to human society, if he just, like, I don't know, donated money to NASA and let them do it instead of trying to do it himself. I don't know. Well, anyway, Elon Musk. What? This is the second time. Elon Musk is wrong about Mars. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And anytime that you hear him talking about colonizing Mars, you should laugh because it's obviously not going to happen within his lifetime. All right, family members. Casey absolutely needs to go out. And so I don't know if you've heard the little woofs, but my time is up today. Kimmy and I say hi. We hope you have a nice day, family members. Take care of yourselves. Bye.